Mirel, I think we're good to go.
I think we are.
Okay, great. So thank you. Thank you for starting us off with that lovely music. So welcome everyone. My name is Catherine McCullough, and I will act as your moderator for approximately the next hour or so. We want to welcome you and we want to embrace the fact that we have attendees from all across Canada on behalf of the project partners. So in addition, we have over 70 participants from across Canada in various sectors today. So our attendees today with us on this call include system administrators, the Canadian Heritage Trustees, our partners in education, the Association of Universities and Colleges, and a few other professional associations from various government sectors. So on behalf of all of us today, we welcome you and we're looking forward to this engaging conversation. I also want to thank and acknowledge Lori French, the president of CSBSA, who's here as well on the call to support the project. So just a couple of housekeeping items. I'm sure we're all very accustomed to living in the land of Zoom lately, but let's just go over some Zoom protocol. I'd ask if you could keep your microphone muted. We will be calling upon people, I hope, at certain times to provide some input, but when not speaking, if everyone could keep their microphone on mute. And like I said, near the end, there will be an opportunity and we will welcome questions and comments from the participants. By now, all of you are familiar with the chat function. So we will begin using the chat function throughout this session today frequently. And in addition, I just want to make everybody aware that today's session is being recorded. So if I could begin, I'd like to draw your attention to the agenda that all of you received, and you will get an idea of what the next hour or so is going to look like. And in addition to that, in the agenda, we attached the CVs of some of the individuals that will be speaking today, and I'll make those introductions shortly. So it is my pleasure now to turn this over to Nancy Pinch-Worthy-Lake. And Nancy, if you could lead us in a land acknowledgement.
Thanks very much and welcome everyone. On reconnaît que nous sommes situés sur le territoire ancestral et non cédé des Premières Nations, des Métis, des Inuits et de tous les premiers peuples du Canada. Nous reconnaissons les peuples autochtones d'hier et d'aujourd'hui. Nous nous sommes engagés à améliorer les relations entre les nations et à promouvoir le respect de l'histoire et des cultures des peuples autochtones. Veuillez réfléchir aux conséquences des actions passées et réfléchir à la manière dont chacun de nous, dans le plein esprit de réconciliation et de collaboration, peut en apprendre davantage sur nos voisins et les traités des territoires. Merci.
Thank you, Nancy. So it is my pleasure now to introduce the steering committee. And this is the project steering committee that are responsible for putting this project here together today. So I would, if you on Zoom, if you could just give a quick wave. So the steering committee includes Nancy, who just gave us the land acknowledgement. So Nancy Pinch-Worthy-Lake. Nancy is the executive director of CSBA. Ken Bain is here as well, and Ken is the executive director of CASA. And then also with us are Valérie Morand. She's the executive director of FNCSF and RNDGE, which are our Francophone counterparts to CSBA and CASA. I always say in education, we talk a lot of acronyms. So we'll make sure that when you get the feedback or the follow-up, we'll make sure that we acknowledge what all those acronyms mean. So I want to spend a moment talking about why we're here and what the purpose of this project is. So as I said, this project is funded by Canadian Heritage, and what the aim or the goal is to gather from school systems as much information as possible to develop a sustainable and accessible pan-Canadian infrastructure so that we can depict French language and French minority language in terms of the teacher shortage as much as possible across the country. The purpose of the database will be to collect and house accurate, standardized data that will help aid in the Francophone and French language teacher recruitment, immigration, certification, mobility, and retention. So this is why you've been invited here today. So really, the main purpose is to identify from your perspective the challenges and the realities as they are felt in school systems. So today, in our effort to bring all these parties to the table, we really want to heighten your awareness, create a shared awareness around the French teacher shortage. And most importantly, not only hear from the presenters shortly, but also gain your input and insights in how this data that we are collating and gathering will best suit your needs. And your participation in making this happen is vital. So it is my pleasure to present. I'm going to make the introductions of the speakers first, and then I will move over to individual speakers. So we want to welcome a number of speakers that we have here today from across Canada, and they are going to begin by sharing their experiences and their perspectives about the French language teacher shortage, and really discuss from their perspective how a Canadian-wide database would best serve them. And we thought that would be a really powerful way to get this engaged process underway. What you can expect is that each speaker will take roughly 5 minutes or so to give an overview. But what is most important to us is if you could jot your comments, your questions, your reactions, your insights into the chat function. And I'll do my best, the best that I can to highlight some of those comments and questions following each speaker. Also note, all of your questions will be summarized and reviewed immediately following this presentation. So I'll make the introduction of our 3 speakers, and then Elaine, you're going to start us off. So our first speaker is Elaine Egan, and Elaine is the Assistant Superintendent for HR of Pembina Trails School Division in Manitoba. So welcome, Elaine. We also have Pino Buffoni, and Pino is the Director of Education for the Renfrew County District School Board in Ontario. And we have Claire Guy, Executive Director for the British Columbia School Superintendents Association. And of course, you've already met me, I'm your moderator. So I would like to have Elaine start us off. And Elaine, if you'd be so kind, we would really enjoy hearing your perspectives, your insights, and I'll keep track of the chat. So over to you.
Thank you very much. So in a strange turn of events, I'm talking to you from my car, about 2.5 hours-ish west of Winnipeg. And that is something that I would have never even conceived of pre-COVID. So maybe there's a silver lining. So first of all, I'd like to express my appreciation to Ken Bain for inviting me to participate. I'm very passionate about this subject. And I think, you know, as many people in my role across Canada, we are very aware of the challenge, and I won't focus too much on that, but I will tell you that we have 35 schools in our district. We're an urban district in Winnipeg, 15,500 students or so. We offer French immersion in our 7 early year schools, 4 middle year schools, and 2 senior year schools. But also in Manitoba, we offer French communication and culture in every single one of our 35 schools. In Manitoba, parents have the right to choose French immersion programming for their students, so we don't cap our programs. We simply continue to hire to fill the need. And right now that need is about 35% of our kindergarten students enroll in French immersion. So that's, you know, about between 300 and 400 a year. There's attrition, of course. So by grade 12, we're educating about 15% of our grade 12 students in French immersion. Besides that, we want really robust programming in our English schools, and all 35 of them need French-speaking teachers as well. My bio missed a couple of things. I've been in education for now over 40 years, and I began my career as a French teacher myself. The reason that is true is that I had one great teacher in high school who really turned me on to the possibilities of becoming a Canadian that had fluent French. I had a facility for languages, having been exposed to a few other languages as a child, but she was the turning point for me. And I think in the role that I have now, I want at least one great teacher, preferably more than one, for all of my kiddos in K to 12, so that becoming bilingual in the middle of the prairies is at least possible. So we know that it's Canada, and there are wonderful opportunities to learn French beyond public school. For myself, I spent 6 weeks in Trois-Rivières, Quebec through Explore Canada, a program that made a world of difference for me and for my confidence. But flash forward to what I'm doing now. The struggles around staffing for French immersion continue, especially French immersion. I'm going to focus on that area. We do all sorts of interesting things. I travel to universities in Quebec. I do recruitment fairs here at Université Saint-Boniface. I do online recruitment. I do pre-hiring. I hire more teachers than I think I'm going to need, and then I always undershoot the mark, of course. We take teacher candidates of promise in their final year and offer them contracts for the next year. We take teachers on term who show promise and give them permanent contracts without actual placements for them. And yet it's challenging. So when I had the opportunity presented to me to understand more about the challenges and the opportunities and the possibilities around using actual data, I really was very excited to commit some time to that. I do have a very hands-on approach to staffing, and I feel like I have my finger on the pulse really well. And yet, I don't really have data, good data. I don't have strong data about attrition. I don't have more than just anecdotal data about who leaves our district for other districts, why they leave, when they leave. I don't have strong data about how quickly or how often teachers leave French immersion for English track teaching and for what reasons. I don't have good demographic data around my French immersion teachers. I have great demographic data around my teachers as a whole. I don't know where there are universities in Canada that are graduating more French-speaking education students than might be needed right in that community. And so I think in my case, I can say that I'm so busy responding that I don't shoot up to the balcony to that 10,000-foot view and sometimes say, okay, what is it that I could still learn and how could I get help? So that's why when I met with the team to prepare for this, I thought, wouldn't it be great to be part of something where we could have a view that was more predictive, less responsive, and where we could really work together for all of Canada to be able to hire really, really well. It breaks my heart when I have a posting for a French immersion teacher that has 3 applicants, and when I have a posting for an English speaking teacher that has closer to 300 applicants. We're very fortunate here in Winnipeg. In Pembina Trails, we are actually, I can proudly say, an employer of choice. We have wonderful opportunities for teachers. We've got excellent professional development. We have wonderful schools, well maintained, a rich variety of schools, so people can teach in anything from a fairly small K to 4 milieu setting all the way up to a high school setting of 1,300 students, if that's what they want to do. We provide for excellent mobility and supports for our teachers, and yet we struggle with filling the jobs that we need. So I can only imagine how challenging it is for some of my colleagues across the country. And I really believe that every family who chooses French immersion, or in the case of Manitoba, every child who attends school in an English stream has mandatory French instruction from grades 4 to 8, and then the option to choose from grades 9 to 12. I want excellence for those students, just like I had some excellence for myself. So I was very delighted to be invited. I am really looking forward to seeing what happens here and from here, and being part of any pan-Canadian solutions that we could bring together. Oui, merci beaucoup et bonne journée.
Thank you, Elaine. That was insightful to get that, that perspective. So just a couple of comments. Well, I like this comment. This is the best drive-in Zoom presentation yet. Merci, Elaine. I think we're all impressed that you're somewhere in your car.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just curious, where in the province are you in your car?
I'm in Brandon, Manitoba. We needed to drive out here to get at the front of the line for a medical assessment of some kind. So I'm here with my husband, who's sitting here right now, earlier than I thought. He's being very quiet. So it's just one of those bizarre things. But it is kind of interesting because a couple of years ago, I would not have been able to participate, or I would have had to do a lot of rearranging too. So this Zoom thing is interesting in that way, at least.
Right. So true commitment. Thank you. And that was from Laura. So just one comment in the chat, and I'll share this with everyone. And this came from Sarah Federation. She said, French immersion recruitment and retention of teachers starts long before post-secondary studies. It starts with passionate French language educators who instill the passion and love of French in their students. So thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely.
Very insightful comment. And then Carol's comment, we need to grow our own. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to turn this now over to my colleague, Pino. And as I said, Pino is the Director of Education in Renfrew County District School Board. And Pino has a very interesting story to tell and lots of experiences, firsthand experiences to share around his journey. So over to you, Pino.
Merci, Catherine. Bonjour, c'est un plaisir de participer à cette conversation avec vous tous aujourd'hui. Je suis fier d'être un produit de notre programme de français de base de notre système d'éducation publique. Je continue mes études en français car c'est important pour moi personnellement et professionnellement. Je suis, me disent-ils, une bonne B2 avec l'Alliance française d'Ottawa, ici à Ottawa, que je continue mes études. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're at. Our district, as Catherine has mentioned, that I'm director of in Renfrew County, is relatively small in population, which covers a relatively large geographic area, including a mix of rural and urban communities in 17 municipalities, really just west of the National Capital Region, running all the way along the beautiful Ottawa River to South Algonquin Park. As part of my onboarding process as Director of Education in the winter of 2017, the Board of Trustees asked about looking carefully at the rejuvenation of programs and services for students, not only to meet their needs in the present, but also to meet future needs of tomorrow. As part of that process, we initiated a visioning exercise in the fall of 2017 to review and refresh programs and services across the district. A key aspect of this visioning was the expansion of FSL programs across the county, including a multi-year expansion of French immersion in each family of schools at the elementary level, and a strategically stepped program pathway for FSL course offerings at the secondary level, which we're currently conducting. Based upon a set of guiding principles for our district that include establishing consistency of programming set in a bilingual context at the elementary and secondary levels, including a time allocation model for the language of instruction by subject area and by grade at elementary, which we've completed and is underway, and course selections designated en français at the secondary level, which is in progress for us in our planning right now. We also wanted to ensure equity of access to FSL programs, core, extended, or immersion for all students in each family of schools based upon the choice of students and their parents and guardians, welcoming of all learner profiles, which builds on Elaine's comment that we're really continuing to serve the needs of FSL as they arise from the choice of our students and their parents and guardians. We want to continue to honor program pathways for students, including apprenticeship, college, university, and the workforce, through the explicit connectedness of French as an additional language asset for our students, actualizing the fact that all programs in FSL lead to proficiency in the language at varying degrees. And last but not least, innovation in the areas of scheduling, timetabling, and course offerings at the elementary and secondary levels to foster creative solutions to site-based constraints in order to avoid the evolution of two solitudes, an immersion program and an English program. The why for us as a learning organization for all of this really isn't very technical, because we think it's really good for kids. The acquisition of the language has been important in so many contexts, really up the highway, so to speak, from a fluently bilingual city in Ottawa and across the river from a predominantly French-speaking province. The outcomes to date have been inspiring for us as promising signs that we're headed in the right direction. We're moving into the 4th year of a 5-year expansion initiative, and we've grown our FSL programs while maintaining the integrity of our English with Core French programs in all elementary sites. Now, immersion isn't offered at every school, but it's offered in every family of schools, and parents have the choice as to whether they want to send their children to the community school that may or may not have immersion, or directly to another school that has immersion right at entry in kindergarten. We've also differentiated resources, human, material, and fiscal, for English programs to keep grade configurations that are reasonable pedagogically, as well as for French programs to address the ever-evolving diversity of learning needs of our students. The second point I wanted to highlight as a promising sign for us was increased enrollment in the district for the first time in well over a decade, and that's predominantly in kindergarten registrations, with our trends indicating about 2/3 of our parents and guardians really looking to enroll their children in an early French immersion program. It's very popular in our county. Curiosity and interest from pre-service candidates, as well as experienced educators provincially, nationally, and internationally in positions available and growing across the system beyond those that we were able to offer full-time. What we're really lacking in right now, and Elaine alluded to this as well, is we're having a more difficult time attracting individuals for long-term occasional positions or part-time positions, but we've been successful at acquiring individuals for positions as full-time contracts, and I can speak a bit about that too in terms of what we've done. And last but not least, the participation in the DELF, the Diplôme d'études en langue française, at a success rate between 90 and 95% for our students at the A2, B1, and B2 levels respectively, with fewer and fewer students challenging the A2 level. And that's been really inspiring for us, not only for students who see their way through the immersion pathway, but also for students in English with Core French, that they're challenging that A2 lesser and lesser, and into the B1, being able to demonstrate proficiency in the French language. Of note, our district has established a partnership with l'Académie Clermont-Ferrand in South Central France with 3 main objectives. Of course, as you might imagine, student exchanges. The part I'm most excited about, to be honest, beyond, of course, those experiences for our students, is staff exchanges. Exchanges for individuals who are mother tongue French, who would come to teach for a year in our district. And of course, one of the things that the leadership in Académie Clermont-Ferrand were looking for is mother tongue English speaking teachers to instruct in France for their English classes. And the third part is governance, including professional learning plans to share amongst educators globally. We're looking forward to resuming this partnership post-pandemic, as it's ironic to say we were finalizing the plans for the very first exchange between two teachers, Valérie and Ian, on March 12th of 2020, the date that the pandemic was announced and that we would not be returning to schools. Of note, the provision of accessible, upgradable, scalable databases for FSL teachers across the country is extremely useful for me as a senior leader and in a senior leadership capacity, as it'll help our organization gauge the acceleration or deceleration of program expansion in order to respect the positions in place for English language staff as well as French language staff respectfully and sensibly. So that's part of the real driver for me in terms of the Worthy initiative taking place. Je vous remercie de votre attention. Je serai heureux de répondre à vos questions maintenant, peut-être plus tard. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Pino. Thank you. So just a couple of comments that were in the chat, and they've sort of been coming in, Pino, during your presentation, but definitely there seems to be consensus and agreement about the lack of data and information to find French immersion candidates. For example, do we know if each province is graduating enough French-speaking teacher candidates to grow the ever-growing needs in our schools? And also to the important messaging, and this was a very insightful comment from Dan Crandall, the important messaging that all FSL programs lead to proficiency in French. And also, some of you have some suggestions. So they were asking if you had some suggestions, where would you provide those? So we ask that you provide these. And what I'll mention just prior to this is there's going to be a follow-up survey. So if you have any ideas, suggestions, recommendations, we would really value that you put that input into the follow-up survey so that we have a hard copy of it as well, including what we summarized from today. And also, another comment, Pino, they found individuals are finding this pipeline question very interesting. A big challenge coordinating with universities and the ministry and successfully traversing the different provincial systems and legislation. Do you have any comment on that, Pino?
I think it's an excellent question, and I think this is part of why today's session is so important. For us in Renfrew County, one of the things we did do is establish our own internal FSL task force. We really took a good look at some of the things that we could do, and interestingly, I've been sharing with colleagues, one of the things that's been really helpful for us is we took this challenge or opportunity outside of the education sector. We spoke with a couple of organizations that do human resources outside of education, and they gave us very, very helpful feedback, some of which they acknowledged they didn't quite understand the educational system overall and how hiring happens, but they were very helpful for us on a couple of fronts. And one of them was that they spoke to us about how unattractive some of our postings looked. That when you make a posting, even in templates like we use, such as applied education, they didn't seem to garner interest, passion, excitement. And that led us to an inward look. And now, along with those postings, we produce a series of videos to attract people to Renfrew County for teaching in French. And it's amazing the difference it's made to people about explaining what the county's about, our long-term vision around FSL. And that's really, to me, and
Okay, Pino, you froze. So are you back?
Mhm.
Okay. So I think Pino ended up with, you know,
Please.
are you back, Pino? Sorry, you just cut out there. You froze. Okay. Thank you. A really provocative strategy that Pino shared. I love the idea about the videos, because when you're coming to a county or an area of the province that you know nothing about, the video is a very enticing way to tell a little bit more about who you are and your story and what you offer. So kudos for you. Great idea. I just missed one comment before we move on. And this comment came from a trustee with Christ the Redeemer Schools in Alberta. Joanne, thank you. Joanne's going to forward a PowerPoint presentation informing the enrollment in the languages program. So that would be really interesting. And then a comment from Nancy. National coordination and collaboration are the key, which is why this initiative is so important. We don't want to duplicate anything that's already in place. The plan is to build on and scaffold what we already have. And we need everyone's help to ensure this database meets the needs of the systems and all the students we serve. So thank you, Nancy. And from Laurie French, merci, Pino. Love the strategy of staff exchanges. This kind of creativity is key. And you know what, Pino, by you sharing something like that, I always like the expression rob shamelessly. Perhaps there are some others that are on this call today that would say, you know what, that's a really great idea. And I'm going to try to rob it shamelessly. So good for you, Pino. So our third presenter, I have the honor and pleasure of introducing to you once again. And that is my colleague and friend, Claire Guy. Claire is, as I said, the executive director for the BC Superintendents Association and has some really tremendous insights as well to share. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue. Je m'appelle Claire and I'm so happy to be here today. And I was kind of chuckling when I was listening to Elaine because she was concerned if she had only 3 applicants for a French immersion position. And in British Columbia, we'd be cheering if we had 3 applicants for a French immersion position. And I really appreciated what Sarah said in the chat about loving language learning, because that's the focus that I'd like to bring to this conversation today. So being on the West Coast, we actually have more ties to to Asia than we do actually sometimes to Eastern Canada. And so not everyone in British Columbia values French in the same way. And we have a big focus right now on Indigenous languages and other language programs like Mandarin and Punjabi. So in British Columbia, our challenge isn't only about recruiting and retaining French teachers, but it's also about retaining the students. And Elaine mentioned a little bit about attrition, but we actually have provincially about a 50% attrition rate in our French programs, in Core French and Immersion Précoce, Tardif, and even Français Intensif. And with that attrition also goes a bit of a gender bias, so that by the time we get to the end of grade 12, we've lost just about all of our boys. And that's a concern for us too. So when we transformed our curriculum in British Columbia years ago, I was very fortunate to be involved in that process. And my neighbor was my motivation through all that work. And I just want to explain that story a little bit because I think it speaks to what we're talking about today. So my neighbor, when he graduated from grade 12, wasn't a particularly motivated student in school, never took a language course in his life. And when he got out of high school, he didn't really know what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. So he decided to travel, and he went and he lived on a beach in Thailand for a year. And of course, he met a girl, and the girl was from Denmark, and she didn't speak a word of English, and he didn't speak a word of Danish. I think, oh, there we go. We got somebody not muted. Okay, thank you. Sorry, so my story. He didn't speak English or Danish, pardon me. She didn't speak English. And of course they fell in love. And lo and behold, a couple of years later, he moved to Denmark to be with her. He ended up going to school, to post-secondary, to become a Red Seal electrician in Danish. They got married, they have 3 kids, they're living happily ever after now in Denmark, and everybody's bilingual. And so for me, that was a very, very powerful story because it talked about the importance of language for for communication and for purpose, and it needs to be relevant. And we need to instill that love of language in our kids and in our teachers. And so for me, to recruit and retain our teachers and our kids, we need to think differently, and we need to think about some outside the box solutions. And so I believe that our language programs need to look a little bit different. And quite frankly, I think they just need to be more fun, fun for everybody, teachers and students alike. And they need to be relevant and practical and inclusive of all kids, not just an elitist program. And I believe we need to have more hands-on learning experiences that appeal to all genders, that are experiential. And we know in BC, we have a real issues with burnout for our French teachers. And there's a lot of pressure on them, a lot of barriers that exist for them around resources, testing. And, you know, the students want to keep their grade point averages high. And so sometimes they drop out of French for that reason. So thinking about, you know, how can we transform these programs for everyone? Thinking about, you know, perhaps out of the box, could we do cohort programs? And could we cluster courses that are really exciting for teachers to teach and kids to learn? And we know right now in British Columbia, we have a big focus on learning from the land and Indigenous education, outdoor environmental education, social justice, physical education, arts and culture, and work experience. You know, we tell the kids all the time how important it is to learn another language to get a job, but why don't we offer work experience, real work experience opportunities in French for our kids, and create partnerships with organizations like Parks and Rec Canada or the hospitality industry? So when I think about data and what kind of data we could use to expand our pool of teachers and create more vibrant programs, if we're looking to think outside the box around hiring and recruiting teachers, I think it's also a requirement for us to think outside the box as to what kind of data we would need to support that. And I think for us, it would really help to engage with the post-secondary teacher training programs and to find out and work with them on what kind of coursework and experiences and pedagogical approaches they're taking with their pre-service teachers and what kinds of innovation they're providing for them. And then I think it would be really helpful for us too to have some data from them about their relocation priorities. So asking them, where would they like to settle and teach, and what are their preferences around rural or urban, so we can fit them and provide a good match for them with their hobbies, with their family circumstances, and even surveying them, you know, to ask them if we could get them to come, what would keep them there. And would that be cohorts of teachers coming together so they have a support network and they're not alone? So for me, it's about thinking differently, because I think if we keep, you know, we are very fortunate in BC to have a lot of data, and we do have a lot of the data that people were mentioning already, but I think we need to get some new data. So I'm very excited that this project is happening, and thank you.
I got lots of comments in the chat to share, so thank you very much, Claire. So a few things that have come in, and this was in response to Pino as well, and just some really insightful comments. So Pino, I'll just start with you. Everyone really sort of affirmed the point that when you spoke to the disparity in systems, right, and that you'd love to see this initiative level the playing field and better resource smaller systems. So just an interesting comment there. The Alberta School Board Association, this is again from Joanne. They established a trustee committee that focused on language education, and the committee presented an interactive PowerPoint to the Provincial Parent Council, and then they discovered that rural parents wanted French immersion. Also too, some very good points, Claire, well said. Equity is essential, and so is having fun. The points that fit in about, you know, teacher preferences, making the fit and teacher preferences are really important. And you also spoke a little bit about gender equity too. So that was an insightful comment. And also a question to all. And so this is a chance really, this is the section of our agenda where, you know, you can provide additional comments, suggestions, recommendations. I have to applaud you thus far. There's been some really great points that have been shared. But a question to all, and this came from Mark Johnson. Is it possible to count how many students were not admitted in a French immersion or intensive program in a given year because of a lack of teachers available to offer, or because you've had to move to waiting lists or lotteries? Interesting. Yeah. And this from Vivian to everyone. Many districts have caps on French immersion entry, not because of the lack of FI teachers, but because of other factors such as contract language and class size limits, etc. So another interesting wrinkle to the whole challenge before us. So if there are any other general comments, in fact, if you want to put a comment in the chat and you want to come off mute and share what you have to say, we would welcome some other voices. So I'll just keep an eye here. Anybody, Vivian or Mark, you were the last two. Anybody who wants to come off mute and make comments or share an insight?
Hi, thank you for the invitation to do so.
Yeah.
So it's Vivian.
Vivian, where are you from?
I'm from BC. I'm in the Qualicum School District, which is on the Vancouver Island.
Excellent.
So one of the challenges we have on the island is that the French immersion teacher candidate programs are all on the mainland. So we have a couple of universities on the island, but they don't actually have French programs for the teachers. So it's when we have practicums with French speaking teachers, it's because they happen to be in the teacher candidate program and just also happen to speak French. So it becomes a challenge when, of course, practicums are a great way to get to know educators and for them to also find out whether they're interested in a district. So we don't have that same pool of teacher candidates to pull from on the island. And it seems to be, we've talked to the ministry about this many, many times over the years, and for some reason, there is a resistance to adding another French immersion teacher candidate program. So I'm not sure what that is. My other point around the I'm very concerned about putting caps on entry into French immersion programs. And one of the worries I have with that is how we unintentionally create an exclusive system in that way. So we end up having wait lists of people who are dying to get in, and they can't get in until a seat becomes open. And it doesn't help with that psychology of making inclusive programs. And so I like the notion of being a little creative around this. Not sure what that looks like, but I'd love to explore what that might look like at some point. Maybe not now, we don't have a lot of time, but in the future. Thank you.
Vivian, thank you. Your reality is, you know, we're all envisioning where you are in that part of Canada, and your reality certainly sounds like it might be fairly unique. I know that Pino did share some, you know, creative approaches that maybe give you some ideas or thoughts. Any other reactions, comments? We'd welcome your voice. If you want, you can raise your hand and I can call upon you. So Joanne, please go ahead, and would you be so kind, tell us where you're from, Joanne?
Okay, I'm from High River, and I'm a trustee with Christ Redeemer School Division. And we have schools from border to border, from BC to Saskatchewan. And so a very large Catholic school board. But the important part is that I'm a member of this provincial team of trustees that promotes languages education. And we have been doing research and we are doing promotions. And the last one was a presentation to the Alberta Parent Council Association. And we had some very talented participants who did this PowerPoint presentation that's interactive. And that's where we found out that rural parents now familiar with Zoom and having broader lines of communication in the internet are now wanting to have French immersion. So I can envision that's going to be online. And we also have a big online school in our school division that has grown terribly large now under COVID. But our biggest concern is the dropout rate in the language program once students start junior high and then high school. So from a financial point of view, the school divisions have a problem with financing classes that are 7 students large in the high school system. And so we find too that there are so many options available in junior high that students then who find language learning becoming hard work, they rather choose something easy. So it's we felt that's why we needed to go to the parent association to get parents to be motivated to support their students to staying in the program, because we don't get homegrown talent if we are not getting the kids to grade 12 and beyond, and exchange programs and etc. Falling in love with somebody who is French, like our youngest daughter did. So she's now a Francophone. So yeah, those are my concerns, and in the province in general.
Thank you. That's very valuable. Thank you for sharing that. All right, just a couple of comments. Sarah posed a question. The Government of Canada reports from 2019, from a 2019 report state that French teacher language proficiency is an issue in French language education. Sarah's curious to know what school boards have in place for teacher language proficiency requirements across Canada. If you have knowledge of this from your particular district or your role and responsibility that you come to this call today with, we'd really value if you could share that kind of information. And quite frankly, that might be part of the data that we gather. And Nancy, do you want to just ask your question? I think I can share it, but you might as well come off mute and ask your question. I think it's very
because we're building a database that absolutely has to be useful. My question back is, what kind of data would be helpful to the initiatives like the one in Alberta? What data don't you have that you'd really like to have? And this is a really good example too. One of the survey questions could, or to build the data bank could exactly be, what are school boards doing around proficiency?
Right. Thank you, Nancy. That's great. So I guess I would continue to open this up to say if there's any other comments, suggestions. I found this to be tremendously insightful because it's given me a bit of a cross-Canada perspective. But there's so much more, I'm sure, that we don't know. But collectively, when we work together, I'm sure we can do as much as possible to try to address this ongoing challenge or that's before us. So if there's any other comments, I'll just wait a second or two to capture them in the chat. All right, Valerie. I'd like to thank the moderator, organized panelists, of course, participants for a thought-provoking session. Thank you, Valerie. So I think it would be appropriate, and Marianne, you know what would be really nice if you could come off mute and just say hello and just tell everyone what you're, because actually Marianne's been the brains behind the coordination of this event today. So Marianne, before I close, would you just mind coming off mute and saying a couple of comments?
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I had to join, I had to leave the session and join on my phone. I'm having some technology issues on this end, but I would like to thank everybody as well as the speakers. And I know Ken will invite you to do that in a minute. But I guess in listening to everybody and reading through the comments, it stands out to us that there is a sharing of resources that's needed. There are some inequities. We know anecdotally what's happening because we've been hearing about it from various tables, superintendent groups, trustees, but we haven't been able to really characterize what's happening. We haven't been able to put it together to paint an overall picture of what's happening in Canada. So if I have to, one message to pass along would be that I'd like to encourage you to respond to the survey. It's a very quick one that we sent out. It should be in your inbox. And that will help us, our research team. We have a small research data analysis team to design the database, asking the right questions, asking the questions that will help serve you in terms of the solutions that you're generating, in terms of the gaps that you may find. We need this to fit your needs. Otherwise, there's really no point in doing it. We're hoping that school systems will have more direct access to funding. Our project is being funded by Heritage Canada, Canadian Heritage. And it's really, this database should be accessible to all school systems, to partners in education, partner associations, and then it will give the opportunity for everyone who has a stake in what's happening with French language education to access data to help them build their policies and generate their solutions and come up with innovative, out-of-the-box ideas such as the ones that we've heard today from our speakers. But it will help all of the levels, all of the sectors talk about it, converse, and not work maybe so much in a vacuum, not in isolation. It will allow continuous conversation between all those groups. So we feel that this is a very important thing. We are working through the school systems administrators. We're working with school systems directly to be able to access the most accurate data from what's happening on the ground. So thanks again. You'll likely hear from us again. You'll have the opportunity to let us know if you're willing to take part and to help us, maybe even to be interviewed by our data team. You'll have a chance to give us all that information if you so choose in the survey that we're sending out to you. So thank you again. Thanks for moderating, Catherine. It's really insightful to get all of the ideas coming forth from the group. Thanks.
Excellent. All right. So just a couple of things. I just want to say thank you, Canada. That there's the one silver lining from this pandemic we're experiencing is the fact that we have leveraged the power of these kinds of tools to come together, to hear your voice, to hear your input, and to really try to make a significant difference to education in Canada as possible. So not only for your comments on this issue today, but just generally speaking for making yourself available to provide your input. So I think we've pretty much covered everything. I thank you for continuing to populate the chat. There's some awesome information going in that. And like I said, we will be certain that we take our time and go through this information. And I also want to turn this over to my colleague, Ken Bain. And my colleague will just sort of say some final comments and bid us adieu. So over to you, Ken Bain.
Okay, well, thank you, Catherine. A lot of what I was going to say has been said in terms of next steps. The immediate next steps will be to answer the survey. We're going to take away the comments in the chat. You will provide the steering committee with lots of rich information. What we want to know is what you need to know in order to attract and retain French teachers so that we have a robust second language program across the country. My thanks to Mireille from Discatus, who took care of all of the technology behind today's presentation. Thanks as well, of course, to Catherine for wonderful facilitation moderator skills today and took us through the hour seamlessly. My thanks also to my fellow CASA members, Elaine from Manitoba, Pino from Ontario, and Claire from BC. All three of those individuals are members of CASA. Catherine is a former member of CASA, and really delighted that there are so many CASA members on the chat room, in the chat room today and on the presentation. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup et bonne journée.
Take care, everyone.